In this session, we are going to talk about method. So we have already encountered method all throughout our course so far. The main method that we have been keep on using is a method, and we mentioned the method when we talk about different libraries. So you should, by now you should have a good idea of what the method is. Methods are commonly used to break a problem down into smaller, manageable pieces. This is called divide and conquer. Like we talked about before, when you have a complex question, you may want to break it into small blocks. Then break each smaller block into further smaller blocks until the execution steps are pretty clear. There's no ambiguity in how to execute each smaller piece. And the method can serve a very important role in this purpose. Method simplifies programs. If a specific task is performed in several places in the program, a method can be written once to perform that task and then be executed anytime it's needed. This is known as code reuse. For example, in our previous assignment, one of the assignment was to create a sales bar chart. At that time, for each bar chart, for each row, we have to rewrite the same code again and again. And fortunately, there was just one for statement. But imagine if the bar chart, if the code is like 10, 20 lines of code, then every time you have to repeat these 10, 20 lines of code for 5 times or for whatever times you want. And method can put this all into one piece, and you will just refer to this method again and again. So the actual code logic will only be written once. And if you need to modify that, you only need to modify once. This is known as code reuse. The first method we encountered was our public static main, void main. And there's this void keyword in front of the main method. So what is a void method? The void method is one that simply performs a task and then terminates, just like the system output print. It prints out one sentence, then stop. Nothing is happening. Comparing to void method, there's also something called the value returning method. They not only perform certain tasks, but also send a value back to the code, then call it. Like this integer parseInt 700. It will convert this string into an integer, and return value is the 700. It sends a value back so that you can use a variable to receive the return value. In this case, number will become 700. To create a method, you must write a definition which consists of a header and a body. The method header, which appears at the beginning of the method definition, lists several important things about the method, including the method's name, such as main, or we have seen that before, print line, or parseInt. ParseInt. These are all names. The method body is a collection of statements that are performed when the method is executed. So again, this is the block of statement. And when we say block of statement, you should start thinking about several lines of code embraced by curly braces. So 2 parts of method definition is the header and the body, just like this public static void display message. And this public static void are all modifiers to all definitions of the method, and display message is the method name. And between the curly braces is the method body. Here is just one sentence, one statement, but of course you can add more. We have a bunch of method modifiers and the return type and method name in this header. Modifiers define specific aspects of this method. Return type specifies what value this method will provide. Void means it's not returning any value. It's just going to perform a task, then exit. And don't forget this parenthesis. This is also a very important part of method definition. Let's start with method modifiers. Public means the method is publicly available to code outside the class, outside the Java file, outside the class. And versus public, there's also something called private or protected. We will cover this when we teach class. Then there's also static. Method belongs to a class, not a specific objects. Both we will cover in detail when we start discussing the class, the concept of class. Return type, void, or the data type from a value, returning method. Method name, of course, whatever you give, and you should follow the convention. The first word is all lowercase. The following words will all be title case. Parentheses, containing nothing or a list of one or more variables, declarations, if the method is capable of receiving arguments. A method executes when it's called. The main method is automatically called when the program starts, but other methods are executed by method call statements. We already tried to use some method like print line, and that's exactly how you are supposed to call a method, just by writing the method name with parentheses, with potentially, if you have argument, put arguments inside, and the method modifiers and the return type, void or not. Method modifiers and any return type are not written when you are calling a method. They are defining, they are method definitions. You don't need the definition to call a method. You do need method name and the arguments if there's any. So let's take a look at the simple method. As simple as that, we have a method called display message. It does one thing, printing out, then exits, so returns nothing. For this reason, main will print out another message, call this message. And once it's called, execution goes from main into display message. So how it works, let's say this is your main method. And you have statements here. Then you call display message. And further, more executions. And then you also have a display message method. And the statements here. So what's happening is, when you start, actually I should also draw one more, which is Java virtual machine. So when you ask Java virtual machine to execute a class, the execution flow starts from here, Java virtual machine, to main method. Then it will execute following main method, 1, 2, 3, all the statements. When it reaches here, display message, it will go here. To display message. Once the execution of display message finishes, the last statement is executed. The execution will go back to where it was left out. And then it will start running the rest of the execution. And similarly, while you are unaware of that, once main method execution is done, it goes back to Java virtual machine 2. Okay, let me just put it this way. All right, so this is the process flow of calling a method. Now, let's look at deep and deeper. As you can see, this is the way you call a main method, execute a statement, then goes to deep method and jump into deep. Inside deep, you can print out something and going into even another method deeper. And if you think about the infrastructure, the library provided by Java, print line is actually another method. So here, main calls deep, deep calls deeper, deeper calls print line. Once print line finishes, it goes back to deeper. There's no more no more statements after that. But if there's any, we will finish the statement in deeper. Go back to where it was called in deep, and finish whatever left is deep, and go back to main and finish whatever is left in main. So the whole process will be, let's say I'm creating something called deeper display. And this is, of course, print line. And here I'm calling deeper display, followed by other statements. And here I'm calling print line. Then the execution will start from Java virtual machine, go into main. Main method will execute the statements until it reaches display messages. And once it starts calling display message, it will go to display message, execute statement by statement until it reaches deeper display, in which time it will go to deeper display. And the deeper display will execute this print line, goes to print line. And once print line finishes, goes back. And of course, deeper display itself will go back to display message again. Right? So this is a chain of execution. It goes this way: 1, 2, 3, 4, then goes back to 5, 6, 7, 8. So as we have 4 calls, there are 8 steps in calling. Then this is the 4 steps, 4 level steps, 4 levels deep. Right? So this is how you call method one by one. And we can, of course, have more logics inside. Like here, you can have a for loop, run it for 5 times. It starts with 0, less than 5, so it's 5 times. If you have a question, you can use your finger to count how many times it will be executing. Run the display message for 5 times. So there can be many more logic inside each code block. As we have seen, you can use a for loop, you can have if else, but the key is the messages are called this way and form a calling chain.